The London School of Economics and Political Science has earned an international reputation for the calibre of its teaching staff. Professor Conor Gearty is one of those teachers. A prominent human rights lawyer, a practising barrister and founder member of the prestigious Matrix Chambers based at London's famous Gray's Inn, he's also Professor of Law and Head of Human Rights at the LSE.
I was born in Ireland, in Dublin, but I grew up in and lived in a town called Granard, which is in the Midlands of Ireland.
Yeah, fine. Well, I can always do my own research anyway.
Yeah.
I was just wanting to check.
My family background is odd in that my grandfather's and my grandmother's generation was extremely involved in both sides in the fight for Irish freedom.
Oh, thank you very much.
Okay, bye.
Thanks. See you.
My great-uncle was the first ever member of the Westminster Parliament from the IRA, from Sinn Féin, as it was then called. He had been interned, and there was a by-election for Westminster, and he won. And on my mother's side, her aunt had been engaged to be married to Michael Collins, who was the leader of the Republican movement during the War of Independence, as we call it, as the British would call it, terrorist atrocities. There was this kind of contrasting sense of emotions. On the one hand, there was the issue of the partition of the island and the injustice of that. And on the other hand, there was, quite early on, a clear view that I held, and from which I haven't deviated, that the situation in Northern Ireland did not justify the political violence. It would be unthinkable for us, I say unthinkable, for a gang of criminals to tyrannise the East End of London, the Cray twins come to mind, and then to negotiate with the state in return for non-commission of criminal acts. We don't say, we will forgive you your mass killings in the East End of London because we are mindful of no further killings occurring. We say, sorry, we're going to catch you. And they say, I'm going to hide and continue killing. Yes, I know, thought so, we say in reply. We don't say, gosh, that's very puzzling. Let me look again at whether to enforce the criminal law. It never occurs to us. The example in Britain of where we've done exactly that is a very special case. Can anybody remember it? Where we did let people off.
It's the Good Friday Agreement.
Good Friday Agreement. And the Good Friday Agreement is the extraordinary decision. We're going to not only not try and catch you, we're going to let all of your lot out, including the man who blew up the cabinet. So where the criminality has got a governmental aspect, we seem to be a little bit more pragmatic. I did a law degree in Dublin, in University College Dublin. I think that thread to British culture remains. Law was hard work and a bit boring, technically quite challenging, and I preferred the ideas bits of law. And I managed to study political philosophy despite being a lawyer under an absolutely brilliant Dominican priest, Father Fergal O'Connor, and that was a superb course as well. I did quite a lot of the public law, civil liberties, human rights bits when I did my postgraduate degree, which I did in Cambridge. I hope that through this lecture series we can push along understandings of liberty, freedom and security. Thank you very much.
Professor Gearty follows in a long line of LSE academics who practice what they preach. LSE is renowned for its real-world teaching.
I read law at the LSE, and I was very lucky in that the teachers didn't just teach you what law was, which I think a lot of courses do, but they asked you to look at what the law was about. So a really practical way that touched people's real lives.
I did a short course at LSE on international human rights law. That was a fantastic course. It's law as well as politics and history and economics and all sorts of other things. And it just seemed a very well-placed course, a very well-taught course.
So what makes LSE teaching so different?
The main thing that makes a teacher, a good teacher, across any level of education is interest in the person being taught. Whether it's a 4-year-old, a 14-year-old or a 24-year-old. Interest. And that interest then causes people to feel that their teacher is enthusiastic. And enthusiastic is the second great attribute of a teacher, I think.
To what extent are these legalistic? Because we haven't used the word court. We used the word court correctly on regional, but not on international.
In the university situation, I think it's really helpful to be informed as somebody, among others, who makes the subject. So you're also writing about what you teach, or you're going to conferences discussing what you teach, or in my case, fortuitously, I'm litigating what I teach. So to have that sense of being at the cutting edge. One of the remarkable features of a successful institution like LSE's Department of Law is that in different ways, pretty well most of the colleagues are teaching stuff of which they are a part, and that makes for good teaching at university level.
Do we need an independent philosophical basis for attaining that end?
Conor's a very, very interesting guy with a very interesting background, and everyone who meets him remembers him. He's got an extraordinarily dynamic personality and an ability to stand up in front of a room of 400 or 500 people, or in terms of 2 people, and just kind of completely capture his audience and leave you with things to think about in ways that you've never quite thought about them before.
Unsavoury though it is for us, that's appropriate, because it's a political issue that the politicians then had to address.
I knew about Conor before I met him because I'd read some of the stuff he'd written about human rights, and so I knew that he was passionately committed to the issues and to legal reform. And then I met him, and I knew through talking to him that it was clear that he's got fantastic intellectual rigour and an approach to his work. And personally, through talking to him, he brings a different perspective to the work that I do and lets me look at the issues in a different way.
My ideal would be it never occurs to anyone that Mr. Mugabe could bargain or that Joe Coney could bargain. They're crooks. They're international crooks.
I think he's brilliant because he's so passionate and excited about what he does, and because he's a practitioner, he puts it into context and things you've heard about in the papers, and he makes you remember it. And because he's exciting and tells jokes, you remember it. It's not just a stale, monotone lecture. It's something that you all participate in, and he loves that.
What is it all these English people have to hide in their castles? I'm a bit suspicious. You English people are a deep crowd, you know. Things are going on I know nothing about.
I certainly wouldn't have remembered philosophy if it hadn't been in the way in which he taught it, which is about excitement and participation.
Britain has a very extensive DNA database. The British say DNA is like fingerprints. DNA is the most extraordinary social advance, which allows us, if we had a compulsory DNA database for the general public, to eliminate the crime of rape. Just take an example.
I do enjoy teaching very much, and always have. I always sort of help my sisters and friends, and I like the whole challenge of exposition and communication and the nature of it.
All my friends now read his book in an Irish accent because he's just ingrained in our brain, for better or worse, and it's brilliant.